Okay then, as you'll have seen from the post-match interviews, Forest assistant manager Steve McLean thought that Forest should have won that game handsomely and that Lossie's late equaliser was maybe their first decent attempt on goal. Frank McGettrick, the Lossie manager, kind of gave the opposite impression. He felt his team could have been a couple of goals up by half-time even. He was right.
They
were both right. Frank McGettrick's side could have been a couple of goals up in the first half. However, with the chances that Forest had in the second half, they should have been out of sight.
Game of two halves.
Well, I think the thing I would say is both teams could have won it, and obviously both are probably a wee bit frustrated that they didn't. But then if you're Lossie, obviously trailing for the time that they were, and sort of right at the end of the game to get an equaliser, you're away from home as well, you're probably the happier side overall with the point. But I mean, in that first half I thought, well, the early one for Brandon Hutchison especially, but they had a few openings, Lossie, where they could have taken that lead, and once they get in front there, we've seen they can be pretty good at just sort of holding on to that and making it difficult for teams, so they could have been in front. And then Forest, I thought it was a real excellent strike for Craig McKenzie, keeping it low as well, sort of difficult for the goalie to get in front. And then with the chances they had in the second half, I did agree with Stephen McLean. I thought if they'd got the second goal, then they would have probably gone on to win with a wee bit of comfort. But obviously if you don't get that second goal, it can come back and cost you, and that's exactly what's happened.
Forest, we know last weekend they got their first league win in a good while. They're kind of almost, it's 1 point separating them, isn't it, in the table? Forest and Lossiemouth. Forest just ahead. Where do you think those teams are aiming this season now? Haven't watched them both or seen highlights in them both?
A mid-table finish is good for both, I would say.
I think really it's where they are at the moment, 11th, 12th, unless other teams above them drop off. Right now, if you look at the table, it's hard to see them going too much higher, really. Of course, they'll have ambitions to try and be as high as you can, but if you look at the way the table is, you've got Brechin, Buckie, Banks Adi, Fermartin, Fraserburgh, Brora, who are all sort of established top six sides, if you will, and then below that, Turriff have clearly made strides, and they're up in that top half just now. Huntly, although their Saturday's result in their last couple of games haven't been quite what they're wanting, they're also trying to be in that mix, pushing towards the top six. And then you've got Rothes, who maybe haven't hit the heights yet this season, but I would still, for me at the moment, you would have Rothes sort of good enough to be in one of those 8th, 9th, 10th slots at least, I would say.
There was Nairn's opening goal from Ross Tokley's deflected free kick. There was a volley off the bar. There was Deshaun Golden's goal to make it 2-1, which was excellent individually. Missing goals out here, but there was the red card at 3-1. Then after it was 3-2, there was the sending off for Nairn to even things up. Andrew McLeod's control and his goal in 96 minutes to make it a point apiece. Nairn will clearly be the happier side, but what game?
Oh, tremendous stuff at this time of year. Where do you start with this? I'm starting with Deshaun Golden, just for the point of view of I haven't seen in a while somebody body Ross Tokley in the way that he managed to just bounce him off him before they go on to finish the job. Because Stokes is such a big, physically imposing guy and a dab hand at free kicks, it seems. But yeah, to come back from 3-1 down in the circumstances they were in, Nairn will be very pleased, I'm sure. But D will be frustrated not to be still top of the table.
I think it probably shows the difference again for Nairn. I've said this before, but the run they're on, that's 10 unbeaten. I think 30th of September was the last time they lost, and it's like you've got that confidence and belief from winning. Suddenly there's like games where you're never beaten, and I mean they probably needed a wee leg up with the Luke Emmett sending off, just in terms of that extra sort of spark, and then scoring straight for the free kick really obviously helped them as well in terms of having that impetus, and it wasn't like the game could sort of die a death a wee bit. I mean, I'm sure both managers, when they're looking back on it, will be frustrated with the goals have lost and will feel they could do better, but I thought it was a cracking game of football and another really good advert for the Highland League. I think for Banks the thing they will be frustrated with is you look at their record in the league, they've only lost one game, but the six draws, I think it is 6 draws, sorry, they've had now. And when you look over a season, and if they want to be challenging at the top end, they might look back further down the line and feel that some of these games, the likes of that one on Saturday, probably been one where they feel they've maybe let it slip away a wee bit.
I tell you, Callum's touching on a great advert for the Highland League football. It's been a big weekend in Scottish football when you think about what Ross County boss Derek Adams had to say about the quality and entertainment value of matches. He should be coming to the Highland League on a Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, Josh Winton was right. Like, if we watched highlights for like 60, 70 minutes, Banks of D were really good. And I mean,
and Stephen Mackay said that as well,
yeah,
for about his first half especially, in fairness.
Like, I thought like their attacking players all linked up really well. Obviously, as Callum touched upon, the big moment is the red card for Luke Emmett. Just before it, there was Fraser Dingwall's first, or certainly we're going by our highlights, just before it, there was Fraser Dingwall's sort of first booking for a sort of blatant barge. I wonder how much of that incident sort of played into the, like, you know, a bit of retribution afterwards. But was it a red card? Would a yellow have been enough for that challenge?
I think looking, when you see it again, I think if it'd been a yellow, I could understand, because it's one of them where there's not a huge amount of contact, or certainly the time I watched it, I didn't think there was. But Luke Emmett has jumped in and his leg is off the ground, and it's one of them now where referees only get one look at it, and when you see somebody lunging in and that, the way the sort of laws of the game are now, you probably have to lean more towards a red than a yellow. I can understand it, but I can also understand if you're Banks or any team in that situation, when you see it back and see that it's, you know, it's not.
It's the speed of the challenge rather than
it's this old thing. I'm waffling there, but it's the old thing about recklessness and endangering the opponent, and I can understand why the referee has felt that was endangering the opponent. So I think with the way the game is now, he can complain, but I think if you were to say appeal or that, I don't think you would get much joy with that. Fraser Dingwall's second booking I thought was interesting, because we maybe only caught the tail end of it, but I suppose it's probably similar to his first in a way, so I suppose consistency fair enough. But I thought you see challenges like that at a lot of like free kicks and corners and things where it's a foul on the goalie and nothing happens. But by the same token, Fraser, if he's probably looking back at it, I'd imagine he's a wee bit frustrated with himself, because I don't think he was ever winning that ball. So then when you make contact with the keeper, you're giving the referee a decision to make a wee bit.
No, yeah, didn't have to put his body in there.
It's 80-20 in a goalkeeper's favourite as soon as the ball's coming towards him.
The other thing I was going to say as well is that when we were on about the table and the way things are earlier, the team I didn't mention, but Nairn are the other team, they're best placed to do it at the moment as well, but like your sort of Huntleys and Turriffs and that, who have made that improvement over the last season or so and trying to be in the top 6, and clearly results like Saturday as well probably helped their cause.
Yeah, hanging in there. Okay, let's, in terms of rounding up the rest of the results from Saturday, let's start with the teams that are kind of the top half teams, if I can say that. We'll start with Fraserburgh's win at home against Inverurie Locos, 4-2. The headline from this game is Fraserburgh's 4th goal, the one that put the tin lid on it, but that was also the goal to make Scott Barbour Fraserburgh's all-time leading scorer. We're at risk here of just having the same conversation we had last week, Paul.
But he's done it, Ryan. He's done it, which means
and
he
we'll all
can kick
remember
on
him
now.
forever now, won't we?
Well, he'll certainly remember it. He looked very pleased, that's for sure. It's a terrific achievement, and as I touched on last week, to do it in the number of games he has, which is significantly fewer than Mikey Stephen managed in his career at Belsley, is fantastic. And what else can we say about Scott Barbour at this point?
I think there's probably a mixture of relief as well that it's done, because he's been sitting a goal or two away for a wee while now. So now that it's kind of sorted, I imagine everyone's kind of chuffed that they can park it a wee bit. But I think when he came back, or he went back to Fraserburgh in 2018 for Martin, there was always that sense, and I think Scott maybe said at the time that was one of his reasons for going back, was wanting to break that record. And obviously for the majority of that time he's been injury free and been able to do it, and really now there is a potential for him to be
making it his forever.
300.
Come
on, 300. That's what we're after now.
Well,
let's set some new targets for the man.
I'd imagine that would be his target, because realistically he's 31, I think, and if you stay injury free for another 3-4 seasons or whatever, there's no reason why you can't be up 300 plus potentially, which I think if you get to that would probably be, you don't know who could come along in the future, but probably be very hard for them to catch. I think aside from that, if you look at the game on Saturday, it's quite interesting. Fraserburgh now, from quite a bad spell they had earlier in the season, it's 4 wins on the trot again in the league, and they're only 6 points behind Brechin now at the top of the table. So the way I know everyone's played different games and things, but the way the league's sort of shaping up, you couldn't, you know, maybe a few weeks ago people might have said, oh, their sort of challenge in the league's done, but you couldn't say they were out of it now. And Saturday was probably maybe back more like themselves again, in terms of, like, there was a couple, you know, they were in front and lost the goals, but they seemed to have that
extra
gear and where they could push and find a way to win, and they've done that. I mean, even from the clip I saw, the Inverurie second goal to make it 2-2 probably came for Fraserburgh. It seemed like they'd a lot of bodies committed up the park chasing goals at that stage, which is, you know, probably what they're renowned for a wee bit, is that sort of front foot football. So I mean, if you were a Brock supporter, well, you are, but you'd be pleased to see that. But for locals, I thought Dean Donaldson's assessment was quite fair in terms of he wasn't.
They basically said the same thing.
Well, that's it. But he wasn't coming out and sort of saying, "Oh, Ken, we should have done this, that, or the next thing." But he felt he was happy with aspects of the performance. But obviously, you look at this week and last week, 4 goals conceded in both games. That's probably the problem they've had at them, or have just now, because if you're conceding 4 goals a game, you're obviously not gonna win many.
Just to clear up who scored the other goals in that game, Ryan Sargent had Fraserburgh 1-0 up before half time. Greg Mitchell equalised from range for locals after a mistake by Joe Barbour in the Brock goal. Sargent then exchanged goals with Miles Gaffney. Another goal for him. He's been in the score sheet a lot recently. And Jamie Beagrie scored the goal to make it 3-2 for Fraserburgh before the Barbour goal, the history goal that we have discussed at length. Turriff United 1, Buckie Thistle 3. Took 3 goals from Buckie Thistle in the last 15 minutes through Jack Murray, Max Barry and Jack McIver, after Finlay Murray had put Turriff ahead early in the second half. Buckie had not had a game for a while, not had a game since their Scottish Cup win, which set up the Celtic tie, which we've, again, like I said, we said this last week as well. And I think reading Graham Stewart's post-match comments, there was a real sense that, like, they've got so many games to catch up on, they can't be slipping up and dropping points. They didn't do that, and he'll be happy enough with that. But it was quite interesting how much praise he gave to Turriff. It really feels like other managers are looking at Turriff and really seeing an improvement in them this season.
They're a handful. They're a real handful on their day when they're clicking, and clearly they were clicking against Buckie on Saturday for 75 minutes. I think it's a bit of maybe Turriff just run out of steam, and Buckie maybe found their legs a wee bit after, as we've said, not playing for a few weeks. But by the same token, Graham Stewart will be delighted the fact that Buckie still have that gear to go up as well, and that desire. Clearly that they've been so close to the title the last couple of years, and they've got that game in hand. They're probably on paper the team to beat, even though they're further down the table, but they've got to go and win these games, and matches like that on Saturday show that they've still firmly got that bit between their teeth, I think.
it's classic Bucky really in this. I mean, if the last number of seasons, how many games have they won with late goals or won coming from behind? They know what to do and they don't panic. I mean, and, you know, at the end of the day, you can take praise from performances, but it's points on the board that count, and Bucky are pretty adept at putting points on the board consistently. I mean, Turriff, and even from earlier in this season, I know they were at home this time, but probably a step forward again in terms of the two previous games. They've faced Bucky, they lost both of them 4-0, and it's been reasonably comfortable, but to be as competitive as they are will please them. And you know, I know with 15 minutes to go it's still 1-0, but even on another day they might take a point out of that potentially. It was Mark Sparry's goals, I think the 89th minute, and you know, it's just that it'll come in time for Turriff, that next step of winning these games. But I mean, they've shown in other occasions, like when they beat Martin on their day, they're certainly capable.
I kind of feel like we're getting that stage of the season as well. I know we've touched on this already as well, so not to go over old ground, but like it's not like the first few weeks of the season when you see the Huntleys, the Nairns and the Turriffs up there, like they're up there for a reason. It's not, you know, it's because they're consistently, clearly putting in performances of a decent level. Brechin City 5, we're now going to come on to Huntly. Brechin City 5, Huntly 0. As you touched upon earlier, Callum, Huntly are a team struggling for wins a little bit at the moment. They've obviously had the change of manager. Headline from this game though, Grady McGrath, Brechin City scoring his 4th hat-trick of the season. 27
goals already this season in all competitions.
Does anyone know? Probably not. The most hat-tricks a player has ever scored in a Highland League
I
campaign.
don't know about most hat-tricks.
We need to dig that out.
I remember Ian Murray scoring a barrel load one season.
Was he up about 50 odd?
Yeah.
I ken, I'm sure 60s or 70s Davy Johnston of Nairn and Carley and Aberdeen at a time as well, I'm sure he had, I could be wrong, but I have a feeling he potentially has the record for most goals in a season, something like 70 odd, but I could be wrong with that, but I don't
think we're going to get that high.
I couldn't know, but Ian Murray with hat-tricks could be a good shout. It's hard to it's not something that's a definitive
we'll be
record
back in the new year with an answer to this question.
But in terms of the game, well, I mean, Grady McGrath obviously sort of grabs the attention, but Sean Hastie, well, he was played as a trialist last week and scored. He's now signed from Scoon Thistle and scored again. So he's a young player who's got that Gavin Price is obviously, I think from his Perthshire area, Gavin Price is identified and obviously knows about and moved quickly to bring him in. And I know it's early days, but he looks a pretty astute signing for Brechin. And I mean, they had the other one on Thursday or Friday as well with Danny Handling, who's sort of had his whole career in the SPFL with like Hibs, Edinburgh City, you know, various clubs coming down to play for Brechin, even though it is only on a deal to the end of the season. That's a bit of an eye catcher in terms of them strengthening to look to try and win this league and potentially go up. And if you go to the game on Saturday, I mean, a good response from them. You know, they'd lost to Fraserburgh for Martin. They've come back to the top of the league, killed the game off ruthlessly in the second half. You know, if you're a Brechin supporter, you couldn't really ask for much more than that. For Huntly, Colin Charlesworth, I think, won't be happy with the number of goals they're losing these 2 games. It's been 9 goals conceded. I mean, last week obviously was a bit of a sort of roller coaster with the 4-4 with Rothas, but on Saturday, and that's maybe with what we've been saying about certain teams today, the difference a wee bit. First half they competed well and were in the game, but then, and it was 1-0 at half time, but then second half there has been that gap between the sides and it's shown in the scoreline.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether Huntly return to the form they showed earlier in the season.
I think they are capable because it's the same players who've been doing it.
Strathspey Thistle 0 for Martin United 1. This was a game, I've spoken to Stuart Anderson, that I think the wind perhaps had a big-handed spoiling But an early Adam Emsley goal right at the start was the difference. Sounded like for Martin, probably should have won by more, but Stuart was reasonably complimentary as well to Strathspey, and because the scoreline was so tight, there was a chance Strathspey had at the end where they might have nicked something from the game. I suppose if you're for Martin, it's the same thing as Bucky, isn't it? That
take your points and move on.
Take the points.
Yeah.
Wins a win, as Stuart put it himself.
Definitely. I mean, it's obviously if they had slipped up, that would have been something where for Martin would have been, disappointed with that. But then, they've done it, and that's the main thing. Strathspey, I think, lost a goal after 5 minutes, and we've seen in other games this season where they've lost an early goal, and then it's been, quite a few, and it's been quite damaging. So I think the way they've stayed I know they haven't got anything out of it, but the way they've stayed in the game, and we've seen that in other games recently as well, would be encouraging. The other bit of good news for Martin as well is they were saying that Graham Rogers also signed a contract extension, captain, so he'll be in line for a testimonial in another 18 months or so, but clearly having players like him sticking around as well is a good thing for them going forward.
Pro Rangers 1, Rothes 0, perhaps a touch of the same in this game. Another one that didn't sound amazing, and the description of the Brora goal that we got, it sounded like the ball more sort of whacked off Jordan McCrae than
they all count.
But
Jordan, I'll tell you, it was a deft finish. Unquestionably.
I'm going to make exactly the same comment. They won the game, Brora, and that's probably all they care about at this stage.
What cliche do you want me to bring up the drawer here? It's the time of year where you just need to knuckle down and grind it out. Pitches are getting heavier, games are running off, rhythm is all going clean out the window for a lot of clubs. When you're playing, just make sure you win.
And Brora are another team that haven't played.
Well, them and Bucky have only played 12 games, so it's like this thing. I mean, I know Brora are a wee bit further back, but for them, and I mean, we said the same with Bucky. It's like try and win, and then when you get your games in hand,
make them count.
Make them count and close the gap, and they've done that. And pardon me. The thing as well is, I know Rothes haven't been as consistent as they can be this season, but there'll come a there'll come a point where they do beat one of the challengers or one of the sort of teams looking to be in the top 4. So I think if you can play Rothes and come away with the 3 points and sort of tick that off, you're quite happy. And that's Brora played them twice and won both games 1-0, and I'm sure given the way they were pushed on Saturday, and I mean Ross Jack admitted that Brora deserved to win, but he was pleased with how his team played for spells. If now that Brora have had those 2 wins and from their 2 games against Rothes, I'm sure they'll be quite pleased to not have to face them again this season. Them now.
Clattenacudden 3, Keith 1, first win of the season in the league finally for Clattenacudden. Harry Henham fired them ahead from the penalty spot before Matthew Tuke got the Maroons back on level terms. That was Tuke both goals in the first half. In the second half, Ronan McLeod and Connor Bunce gave Gethin's side that crucial win. I mean, Clack will hope that this finally having got over the line, got a win, that this is the first of many now, surely.
I'm sure Connor Gethin's and everyone at Clack are hoping that's like a weight now lifted, because I think they were the last team in the league to get off the mark, and here we are like a week before Christmas. So yeah, they'll be delighted.
Early Christmas present for Connor Gethin.
I'm sure it felt like it. Yeah, and they have chances now in the upcoming run of fixtures to build on that, and I'm sure that's what they'll be looking to do, is to try to move up the table and leave, say, Strathspey Thistle in the behind them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it. They're playing Devon Vale on Saturday, which is quite a big game for both clubs, and they would feel if they could win it, it moves them that bit further away from the bottom. The interesting thing for Clack as well is they seem to have a bit of a goalkeeping crisis in terms of injuries at the moment. That's Kevin Main. I mean, we saw him appearing for Rothes as a trialist earlier in the season.
Now call
him. His old pal for Martin, Connor, got him in between the sticks on Saturday for Clack, and I mean, I know Kevin would work and family and various things. I didn't think there's probably any prospect of him, being back playing as a signed player for anybody, but as a sort of somebody to come in as a trialist to help you out. He's certainly not a bad person to have doing that job. I think for Keith, it's like Keith have shown enough in a lot of games this season for you to be encouraged, and I think there's a lot of good players, like the midfield three that they've had a lot of the time with Craig Gill, Jordan Cooper and James Brownie. I think James Brownie made his 200th appearance actually on Saturday as well for the club, but like players like that and different things, I think they've shown a lot of good signs, but then too often games again like Saturday they're maybe coming out on the wrong side of the result, which will be frustrating, because again, having beaten Devon Vale last weekend, Keith, if they could have won on Saturday, it's another good step forward, and you probably step more into looking to finish, you know, mid-table and be pushing like say Forest and Lossie, rather than, you know, at the current stage you're still losing that game on Saturday, pulls them that bit closer towards the bottom again.
Yeah. One more game from the weekend to discuss. I'm laughing already. Devon Vale 0, Wick Academy 0. The best part about this game was the typically blunt and honest assessment of it from Gary Manson, who is...
I thought for both managers, to be fair.
I think Gary, though, is now in the position of being like your most reliable
straight shooter
manager for... He's perhaps overtaken Graham Stewart in my mind for like most entertaining, like brutal quotes every week. I was really upset at half-time watching what was a debacle of a first half between the two teams, and I said to Craig Stewart after the game, both teams could have played all night and not scored. Which, I don't know, what else is there to say? It didn't sound like one for the purists.
I think we let the manager speak for itself in this one. What can we add?
Well, maybe I don't know. Maybe if it was as disappointing as both Craig, because I mean Craig was pretty blunt about his team in terms of being powder puff and attack and things. If it was as disappointing as both managers were saying, maybe the crowd should have stayed and sort of assembled for the post-match interviews as well, and they would have been entertained with what they heard. But I think I'll pick out rather than all this negativity, I'll pick out a positive in that both sides kept a clean sheet, which have been, you know, pretty lacking for both of them over the course of the season. So, you know, defence is on top. Good
try to say they're glass half empty,
point
guys.
to build on.
Saying, Callum?
Well, no, I can understand their frustration, but when you start hearing that we could have played all night and not scored, being trotted out, that kind of sums up the way it's gone. But a point for both of them. I mean, again, it's quite tight down towards the bottom end. I know they would have both liked to have taken all three, and it just gives you that extra sort of step up a bit. But you know, they're there, and they'll keep battling away and look to try and build on that.
Life can't all be thrills. Here's a look at the latest Breedon Highland League standings after the weekend's matches.